Welcome to this meeting of the Patton Township Board of Supervisors, and I invite all of you to join and stand as you are able, and join us in the pledge. Whoops. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I want to open by first thanking our interior decorator who came up with this design. He doubles as our township manager, so he's truly a person of many skills. At this point, we're going to take comments from the public. This would be on any item that is not already appearing somewhere on the agenda.
Welcome, Ms. Rob.
Oh, I think...
Oh, you went out of order.
Good. I just got excited.
Oh,
to
you know
welcome
what?
Pam, so I just wanted to make sure.
old...
You went out of order.
I don't want to miss it.
But I'm not going to move to adjourn.
I'm sorry, but we have three different versions of the agenda, and I was looking at the first, okay. I would, at this time, like to very excitedly and proudly welcome Pamela Robb, who is joining us as the 5th member of our Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
She was appointed at the last session, so welcome.
Thank you.
And now, public comment. Mr. Payne.
Jim Payne, Sierra Lane Park Forest. This has to deal with Center Region Parks and Rec, but not the comprehensive plan. Back in 2015, I'm an amateur astronomer. As you know, most of the parks have a sign as you go in that says closed at dusk, except by permit, CRPR permit. Living in Park Forest, my window of the sky is about that big, straight up. It's not good for astronomy. So I emailed Center Region Parks, and director at the time was Ron Woodhead. And I asked him what is this permit? And told him, he emailed back, yeah, we have a family stargazing permit. So I applied for it, with all the information that he requested. And you sign a waiver as part of it that will not hold Center Region Parks, the township, any other municipality concerned for the park that you're in. And he then retired about a year later. The new director, Pamela Solikangas, wasn't all that crazy about that idea. So after flip-flopping around with various things, another person that was trying to get a permit, they said that he could get a permit, but he could only have it one night a month, and he had to tell them what the date was ahead of time. And if you know anything about Central Pennsylvania and State College, number one, 80% of the time you don't have clear enough sky for good observing. Then they backtracked a little bit when I got involved because I had had a permit for a while. And they said that, okay, you have to provide proof of homeowners or renters insurance with $250,000 liability, which we had. So I turned that in. Dates on our insurance are in May. So when I applied, she sent back the permit that was good until May, and I had to reapply. So I reapplied, and then it was good until December 31st. I wrote back and said, is there any way of making it annual to my insurance, since that's what you're requiring? And the next year she changed it, so that's the way it was. So I had it from May until May of the next year. This year, in the fall, received a letter that's saying, we're not going to allow that anymore in 2020 and beyond. The parks, as far as I'm concerned, belong to the people. Our taxes pay for the parks, pay for CRPR personnel, stuff like that. I don't understand why it can't be used that way. I use Circleville Park, go in on Valley Vista Drive, and I set up at the far end of the parking lot. It's not like I'm running around playing disc golf or basketball or anything else. I'm 10 feet from my car in the parking lot. The police visited a few times here and there, showed them my permit, everything's fine. You know, if they had the time, I even showed them what I was looking at the moment. You know, but I'm also now a member of Central Pennsylvania Observers, and we do sky watches. They're normally at 2 deck. We've tried other parks, but most of them are at 2 deck. Which, you go to the parking lot, you have to drag everything out about 50 yards from the parking lot to set up. Like I said, Circleville, I'm 10 foot from the car. I'm not running around, tearing around. So anything, and the same thing, that's, even though I have the $250,000 liability proof, I also have to still sign, say that I will not hold CRPR, township, municipality, anything liable while I'm out there. Shouldn't there be some way, even if it's just Patton Township, for me to call the police department and say I'll be out in the parking lot at Circleville Park?
Well, I guess that's a question for,
Well, we should probably ask Pam to come and discuss it with you, and,
it's a great idea.
yeah, there should be some way to work it out.
In her letter, she said she went around to all the municipalities and discussed this with them.
She talked to the managers. She was looking at instituting a system, changing it. So, doesn't mean it's
And
a final
she changed it.
decision.
She did away with it.
Yeah. Well, I thought there was some option that for permitting it as a group or something like that. Which is why I want to have Ms. Salakangas here to have the discussion, or
That's like,
we can have the
I'm a member of Central Pennsylvania
Yeah.
Observers.
So,
We hold sky
Yeah.
watches roughly once a month from April through October and stuff.
she was
But
trying to
but
align
at
the
the same time-
stargazing permits with the other after-hours permits.
she only allows organized groups 1 day a month. And that's like, we've
Well,
asked
again-
in the past
Okay.
if there could be a rain date or a cloud date, more than likely. I said, no, it's that date or nothing.
Well, why don't
So
we do
we don't
this?
have a good track record on our sky watches because usually 4 of the 6 are canceled because you can't see anything but clouds.
Yeah, you can.
Why don't we do this, see if we can get Ms. Salakangas here at the next board meeting, or sit down with me and Mr. Payne and see if we can work out something in the interim.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea.
But, I mean, she can explain her reasoning to the board
Yeah.
at that point. And I'm sure, I mean, we'll work to see what we can work out.
Okay, thank you.
No, good point. Especially the requirement of, knowing it ahead of time which day which night of the month you'll be going out there.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor
Oh,
Abrams
I'm
has a
sorry,
comment.
yes. Mr. Abrams,
I
yes.
I can understand that anyone interested in astronomy, with this kind of setup would put them into orbit, so I hope we can solve the problem.
Nice one.
You just sit up so I can hear these puns. Okay, sorry about that. We're at a point in the agenda where we are going to recognize somebody who's most deserving of this, and I'll turn it over to Chief Jolly.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm extremely pleased to have the opportunity to address the board tonight. We're here to present Officer Brian Schaefer with the department's Life Saving Award for rendering life-saving first aid to a critically injured victim on January 24th of 2019. On the night of January 24th of 2019, Officer Schaefer was at the Ramada Inn Hotel on South Atherton Street conducting an investigation, totally separate from the events that were just about to occur. While on scene, a hotel employee approached him, seeing him in uniform and identifying him as a police officer, stating that a shooting had just occurred in the bar area, just a few short steps away. As others fled from the danger, Officer Schaefer, without hesitation, responded to the bar area looking for the threat. He immediately recognized that this was an active shooter situation. Officer Schaefer realized that the threat had fled from the area, and he began to triage the victims of the shooting. Officer Schaefer identified a female victim who was critically wounded with a gunshot wound to her chest, and he immediately began to render aid to that victim by applying pressure to that gunshot wound. He then notified the Center County Emergency Communications Center of the incident to get additional resources coming. Officer Schaefer was able to keep the victim calm and continued to provide her with first aid. Because of his ability to keep her calm, he was also able to gather suspect information from the victim, and he relayed that critical information to the other responding police units and the officers canvassing the area looking for the shooter. Officer Schaefer continued to treat the victim, keeping her calm and ensuring her safety until EMS arrived on scene to provide more advanced care. It was due to the quick actions and clear thinking demonstrated by Officer Schaefer that a fast police response was formulated against an immediate threat, and that a critically injured patient was sustained in order to receive and be transported to more advanced care. The female victim, who Officer Schaefer helped that night, is alive today, due in part to the care provided by Officer Schaefer. His actions reflect the utmost credit on himself and also on the Patton Township Police Department. I'm very proud tonight to present Officer Schaefer with this life-saving award pin and certificate for rendering life-saving first aid to a critically injured victim on January 24th of 2019. Congratulations. I'll let Brian say something if he wants to say something and any board comments, but real quickly also, I just wanted to make sure we recognize two other Patton Township police officers who were working that night. They were actually working out here in the township, didn't have the proximity that Officer Schaefer had to the incident, but they were working at the time of the shooting, also immediately respond to the area to help canvass, looking for the shooter. They were also using their technology that they have nowadays, looking at social media and providing information that they found on social media about potentially where he was going, what he was driving, things like that, in addition to the information Officer Schaefer was able to provide. So I just want to recognize Officer Carter and Officer Finocchio. They were also a part of the team of the officers who made entry into the residence where unfortunately another life was lost and where ultimately the event had ended. But I did not want their efforts to go unnoticed as well because they were very much a part of this as well too. So. You want to say anything, or I don't want to put you on the spot? But.
I'll just briefly say it's a great honor to receive the award. Under the circumstances, I wish I could have done more, but I feel like I did what I could, the best I could, and I'm very honored, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think Patton Township and this entire community is very honored to have you as a part of this community. Thank you, Officer Schaefer. Most indebted.
I can't think of anyone else I would want there if there was an emergency. I'm so glad you were there, and I just feel really proud that you're part of our police department. Very much.
Thank you. It's kind of a hard act to follow. It's really quite remarkable. Thank you again. But follow it we shall. And it is about a plastic straw use reduction. The idea was first, it actually goes back to the fall of 2018 when it was first proposed to me and to the rest of the board by Candace Kent. I'll have you just wave your hand in recognition. She was concerned about what she was reading and wanted to know what Patton Township could do. In March of 2019, the board passed a resolution that was in support of the elimination of the use of plastic straws, plastic drinking straws, and to encourage local businesses to provide alternative options to reduce the straw waste. And I will say this was after a little bit of a discussion with Chief Jolly and our lawyer, Betsy Dupuy, concerning whether we could make this an ordinance and the difficulty of enforcing it. So we chose to make a resolution, which, as many people know, does not have what we call a lot of teeth, but I believe that this particular resolution has a lot of potential. Then somewhat later, I had contacted a friend who, Tim Kelsey, who heads up the department at Penn State in Community Environment and Development, CED. And he was quite excited about the idea of plastic straws. He thought he runs a class where students pick a project, a community project, and go out and do research and then present that in a paper. And indeed, there were two sets of students in his class very interested in the idea of the reduction of plastic straw. We are very fortunate tonight that not only did they present a paper and share it with all of us, but they're going to be sharing their ideas with us briefly, and then we'll open up for questions. So, before they come up though, I want to say, often when I talk about this, everybody knows about plastic straws, but I get a response or a comment that straws really are not a very significant part of the plastic in our environment, and I agree. It's less than 1%. So in terms of volume, if you go by count, it's about 4% of the items. It's really minimal. But I think it has this potential, and part of it came when I started looking around my house at all the products that I use that have plastic in them. And so I did a little, always the teacher. And I thought, well, there's a lot more than straws. At least we're starting with straws. And so, while that might be a drop in the bucket, straws, I started doing some things around my house. I have a husband who is a chemist nerd, and I got his advice on laundry detergent, I can't use the name of it, but it comes in little packets that are completely dissolvable to their bare elements, mostly which are carbon and oxygen and hydrogen. And lotion, which I can now buy in a tin as opposed to plastic, and soap. Shampoo, I should say. So with that, I would say that already this plastic straw initiative has inspired at least one person here, and I can hope that it will serve as a catalyst for other ways of reducing plastic in our environment. So we're going to have the group, I'm going to actually have the first group stand up, and you know who you are. I just can't rattle off the names very quickly. But it would be MT and Francisco and Brandy. Thank you. Please come up. Sorry, I'm usually a little better. Okay. Doug, this one. Cue Doug.
No, hang on a second.
Okay.
That I didn't get a chance to do.
Okay. So this group took as their project the attitudes of establishments here in Patton Township, and I believe they might have gone a little bit over the boundaries of Patton Township, but it's generally the region. They interviewed them, got responses, and essentially then at the same time educated the establishments about the existence of this resolution, which, a resolution is only as good as the people who know about it. So that was an education process. We have a drum roll?
Yep.
Do you guys want to
Yeah.
start? Sure.
Yeah,
go
I can
ahead.
start.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so basically our project is focused on learning and educating businesses in Patton Township to see what they thought about the resolution and also informing them about the resolution. So As Betsy said, it was about the resolution that it encourages local businesses to reduce plastic straw usage. One of the parts we asked them if they knew about the resolution. Most of the people didn't, but one of them said they had heard about it. So first of all, the methods we used key informant interviews. So we would approach local businesses in Patton Township and ask to speak with their managers. We approached 15 businesses, establishments, and we were able to complete 7 interviews. Our process, we approached them 3 times, and after that, we stopped approaching them because obviously the research has to be volunteer. We can't make them answer questions. And here you could see that most of the businesses that we talked to are casual and family style dining. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to know is how much plastic do they use right now? So the first chart is plastic usage in the restaurant or the establishment by week. So this varied a lot. As you can see, it goes from none at all to more than 1,000 a week. I want to point out that the ones that said that they didn't use plastic straws at all, they had other alternatives like hay straws. So they still provided straws if someone needed. Then the second one, it talks about the percentage of customers that use plastic straws when they go to that establishment. So this one is much more varied. As you can see, above 80% of customers who use plastic straws for establishments shows that option, and in fact, it's more than 80%. The exact numbers were 85%, 90%, 90%, and 99%. So these are the percentage of customers that are using plastic straws when they go to the establishment. And then on the other side of the spectrum, it's 20 to 39%. It was only 14% of the establishments, and then 0 to 19, 2. So it was much more varied.
So here we see the township's role in straw reduction, which would be the resolution. We were asking businesses how they felt about the resolution after explaining to them what it was about. There were a lot of mixed feelings about it. Some of what people had to say, some people said government shouldn't intervene with businesses because they felt the right that as owning or running an establishment, they should be able to have the freedom of using straws if they wanted to or not. They said businesses respond to customers' desires until forced to make a change, basically saying that the resolution, because it's not forced, if customers responded well to using plastic straws, they would keep it. And then also, other businesses, they said that governments should promote change but not force it, such as the resolution does, just as encouragement to, make a change in the environment. Here you see there were 4 establishments that said yes, 1 that said maybe, and 2 that said no, when they were asked if they believed the township should play a role in reducing straw usage. And then the influence of the resolution, locally owned businesses believe that the resolution could make a change throughout the restaurant culture in Patton Township. But a lot of the people who said no, like corporate places such as Sheetz and stuff like that, they said that it would be very hard for them to actually say no, that they can't serve straws, because it would have to be something that the company changed all around the country or region. And then when it comes to changing the policy or the way managers, owners operate their businesses, they don't think the resolution will produce change. As you see, 72% believe that the resolution will have no effect, but 29% believe that the resolution will be effective on the township community as a whole. A lot of them just believe that straws are a very essential part to a dining experience, because the main reason was because of cleanliness. People don't want to put their mouth to cups because they might believe that the cups are dirty and things like that. So they didn't believe that on their establishment specifically, the resolution will have any effect.
And I guess just in general, people thought that plastic pollution plays a huge role in damaging the earth, so they did understand the effects that plastic does have on the earth, animals and such, but that a lot of it had to do with what the customers wanted, and if the customers want straws and they're asking for them, they're not going to deny them that experience. Sort of what Francisco said, it might lessen their time there, or their likability to come back or something like that. And again, they're sanitary to guests, so guests want the straw so that they don't have to touch the cup. That's a lot what we got from most of the managers, especially the corporate establishments that we interviewed, that they had them in their restaurant because the customers wanted them, mostly due to cleanliness issues. And then also, old habits die hard. A lot of people do use plastic straws. It's a pretty much standard thing when you go to any restaurant. They'll place it down on the table, or they already have it in the cup. A lot of places don't just forfeit to not give you straws. They're pretty available at any place that you go that has a dining experience, sit-down dining experience. They're not necessary, people don't really need them, but it is just a habit. Old habits die hard. We also saw this with the populations, older and younger populations, that the managers were saying that the older populations were more likely to want the plastic straws than the younger populations, due to the fact that the younger populations might care more about the environment and being green, and the sea turtles and stuff, for the plastic straws. So some strategies that we saw that they did, and also things that just through our research and understanding how the restaurant business works with things like this, to have paper hay straws, a lot of it had to do with the incentive of economics. If there was a resolution or a law that passed that said, okay, if a business doesn't have plastic straws, you might get a certain tax reduction or stipend or something like that. But there's also, again, what Betsy was saying earlier, that there is so many things that we do have that are plastic in our world, including restaurants, through bags and plates, and a lot of times they just throw everything away. There aren't really good recycling alternatives in Patton Township, from what we heard from the businesses, that a lot of them just will throw everything away. So it really doesn't matter for the 1,000 straws that they might use, because they're using so much plastic in general. But if there was an economic incentive, that it would be a lot easier, especially because green straws do cost so much more than just normal plastic straws. Paper straws tend to be 5 times as much, and businesses are just not willing to do that if there's no incentive for it, especially if their corporations are telling them already, this isn't something we do, this isn't something we care about, so you're just going to follow the situation that's already going on. So for support, policies, things that can be reprimanded if they do not follow it, would definitely be something that could help plastic straw reduction and things like that. Policies for plastic bags, making the purpose clear to the community, making sure people know about the resolution and the effect that it has on the community, and how businesses can play a role in that. And also, as I said before, pushing for the younger generations. As the population here in State College and the surrounding townships change, we see that more of them are looking more to green alternatives, and that it's more just that of just getting the word out there, saying this is something that can be done. How can we do that? And maybe the younger generations will lead this green revolution. So yeah, overall, that's what we looked at. That's what we saw through the businesses that we were able to interview, that generally they do think that some of them do think that it's a good idea to have the reduction and have the resolution in place to emphasize that, but a lot of them really can't do anything due to their customer base and the fact that a lot of them are corporations.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the second group to make their presentation, and then if you guys could kind of hang out, and we'll have a discussion after that. That sounds good. Thank you very much. So our next group is comprised of MT coming up, and Tia and, Allison. Allison and Tia and Bill. There you go. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Betsy, for the introduction. So our group, we were more focused on a research side of this. So we wanted to present to the township some kind of recommendations for what you could do to implement a voluntary plastic straw reduction plan. So when we first met with Betsy last fall, she told us about your resolution. And so what we've kept in mind throughout this process is that we're not looking to just enforce an ordinance to ban plastic straws. We're looking at how have other communities implemented programs that have helped reduce straw use without just passing a law. So in our report, we utilized a literature review, some short case studies of other communities, and then some key informant interviews with local businesses as well as nonprofits who have been involved in other cities. So to begin our literature review, we looked at some academic articles that talks about consumer behavior in particular. So the key findings that we got from that informed the recommendations were the fact that there's an important relationship between whether someone is environmentally conscious and their behavior, as well as the fact that if you make things easier for consumers, they're more willing to do it. So the way that we've seen that play out in our case studies, first I'll describe a study in one of those papers. They basically talk about how if you implement, they studied a supermarket. So if you ask people, do you want a plastic bag, yes or no, they'd be more likely to respond no if they wanted to be environmentally conscious. Whereas if the policy was to give them out just automatically, it's a lot harder for a person to say, like, I'd rather not have that than to just say no at the prompt. So what we found in these case study communities, the kind of policy that they've implemented to make this change is that they just asked these restaurants to participate in their campaign, which mainly involved just an ask-only policy. So instead of your usual experience at a restaurant where they would give you a straw with your drink, you would ask for it if you wanted. So otherwise you would go without it. So these communities, they've had a lot of success. The three that we looked at are Seattle, Pensacola Beach, and Fort Lauderdale. And the one was kind of spearheaded by a local government. The other two were spearheaded by nonprofits. So that could go either way. Like if the township wanted to take more of a leadership, then I think that would definitely work too. So what they've done in these communities, Seattle, they were very successful with a social media campaign that really popularized kind of this movement within the city, and they helped get more and more restaurants, high-profile businesses to join them in trying to reduce straw use. And so the ask-only policy was an important thing there. That's also the same thing they did in Fort Lauderdale and Pensacola Beach. It was also an ask-only policy, but something they did to make it agreeable to both consumers and the businesses is appealing to that environmental consciousness. And so physical media was something that was important, as well as the presence of the campaign and how you could work those two together. So yeah, I believe it was Fort Lauderdale. So they were, as a city government, trying to phase out plastic straws. And so something they did as kind of an incentive to businesses, if you were one of the first 200 businesses to agree to phase out, they would give you something to hang in the window to show that you're part of this campaign. There was something similar in Pensacola Beach that was run by a nonprofit, I believe. And so they kind of depended on using physical media, so they would give that to the restaurant. So then on your table, you'd have a sign that says, like, we're participating in this campaign to reduce plastic straws. And so you'd understand, this is why, like, I'm not receiving one automatically. And so then the consumer at the restaurant feels like they're participating in this campaign, they see a reason to go without it, and then it's also an incentive for the business to participate.
So we also conducted key informant interviews with the nonprofits, like Bill mentioned. And we were able to successfully complete two, one with Ocean Hour Florida and another with the Ocean Conservancy. And basically after synthesizing the questions we asked them based on like how do community, or what does a successful voluntary plastic straw reduction look like and how is it implemented and what tools did you use, we were able to come up with a set of recommendations from them which focused on three main objectives, which is the ask-only policy, the use of social media, and also like additional literature information. So essentially, it was mentioned earlier, but the ask-only policy would be instead of having restaurants go through this big shift and asking them to switch their business models to start offering metal straws or paper straws or other alternatives, instead of just automatically giving, they would instead not and wait for people to ask for a straw. So that's the most effective way to do it, time management wise and also economically speaking. And then we also understood from their perspective the use of social media. So essentially there are plastic straw reduction campaigns already in place, like Skip the Straw campaign and the Last Plastic Straw campaign. And different organizations like the Plastic Pollution Coalition and Ocean Conservancy offer an abundance of literature about pledges that people can go to their local businesses and ask for signage on, or additional information about why it's important and why you should implement it and what that means for your community. So essentially, what we found from there as a recommendation for Patton Township would be to choose a campaign that you align with and start offering the literature from that campaign, like the Plastic Pollution Coalition, and give people that pledge and allow businesses to be part of the solution. And also just the use of hashtags so that customers, when they go to businesses, can highlight what businesses are part of the solution, and in turn that's almost promotion for those businesses, and for future customers to go visit.
Hello. So we also focused on some interviews, like the other group, but we did a more deeper analysis of managers' attitudes towards plastic straw reduction based on their experience in management and what they've seen in their restaurant in particular. So 3 major findings with that was first that paper, metal, and silicone straws, all alternatives like hay, things like that, are less appealing to customers in a sense, and they're also economically not feasible. They're just hard to keep up with sanitation-wise. You would need like specific equipment to clean that, fast-paced and things like that. So kind of going off of what the other group said, maybe if there was some way to incentivize customers to bring their own silicone or metal straws, kind of like how Dunkin' Donuts has, like, if you bring your cup, then you get like 50 cents off the next coffee, something like that. Like Ali said, the ask policy is just most efficient because it results in immediate plastic straw reduction. And it's just better than an outright ban for reasons like there may be disabled customers or children who need straws, so the outright ban just is not also feasible. So that's what I think.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'll ask the other group to come up and open this up to questions from members of the board and members of the audience. And if it's somebody from the audience, if you could come up to the mic and state your name and ask your question. Any questions, comments? Elliot.
I was thinking this initially as a comparison with what happened with smoking, where at first you could smoke anywhere in a restaurant, and today you can virtually not smoke anywhere. But there is a difference because you can pretty well convince more people that smoking might harm them, whereas it's not a personal injury not to be able to use a straw. On the other hand, it's a good idea to try to reduce them, and if the companies had to make all paper straws, the volume that they had to make might lower the cost. I don't know that. But I would just observe that if 100 groups each took it upon themselves to try to reduce 1% of our problem as it exists now, it would go away. And so I think you're doing a great thing.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. I know just the courage to go in and talk to the managers and have the attitudes that you might have received, and you're still willing to go forward. That is courage. And continue, because it will make a difference one day. And we thank you for doing this.
Is there any usefulness, or did anyone ever mention sort of a giveaway, like restaurants doing a giveaway of reusable straws as a sort of show that people come in to gets people in the door to the restaurant, maybe they come back later. Has anyone ever done anything like that? They'd have to pay for the reusable straws, obviously. I don't carry around a reusable straw, I'm too lazy to do that, but did anyone say anything about that, making it a promotional thing? Do you guys have any thoughts on that off the top of your head?
Nobody, no manager that I've spoken to brought up doing something like that. I just don't think it was like in their near future agenda.
No.
But I did mention it, like
You did.
Starbucks and having it,
Yeah.
like how they do it.
Yeah, or like that, yeah,
I
for
guess they
rebate.
feel maybe too small scale to start doing that.
Oh, okay.
But I still encourage them to figure out a way to maybe minimize it on the scale.
Yeah.
So they can make that work.
They incentivize it, carrots and sticks. It's really interesting. I really appreciate the work you guys did.
I also feel like it varies by like.
Could I ask you to go to the microphone when you speak, so
Yeah.
our vast CNET audience can also hear you?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say that I feel like the establishments that we worked on were more like family restaurants and like fine dining. That I think that the concept of like bring your own straw is very different to like a family dining scenario versus like Starbucks or like maybe like a smoothie.
Yep.
So I think it's different areas.
That's a good point. I will say, when I don't use a straw, I spill ice on my face. I don't know if anyone else has had that problem, but I'll tolerate it.
Thank you that we need an ice shield. Okay. And I know Candace, you've got a lot of observations, questions, comments, unless anybody else on the board has a comment. And I've told you many times, I'll second what Pam has said and everybody here. Just thank you for taking the time, not only to do the study, having the interest in that, but also to take the time and present. They don't get any credit for this presentation.
Credit for me.
Just good experience and good feelings, and we really appreciate that, because it's going to make a difference. So, Candace? Oh, and actually, you know what, Candace, if you want to, okay, you can go now.
Well, basically, I want to just say thank you so much. I enjoyed studying the reports today and seeing all the different places that you went and, like they said, what you encountered, and getting them to actually talk to you was a challenge, that you did have challenges. And I thought you had good recommendations for future endeavors that the township can consider. I also wanted to, special thanks to Supervisor Betsy Whitman, who encouraged me and followed through with all of this and kind of picked up the ball after the initial resolution and everything. So I was very grateful for that. And just had a quick question I wanted to ask. On your longer report, the three businesses that you did do the long interviews, Mad Max, you know, the Gardens and the Webster's Bookstore, they aren't in Patton Township, so I was curious why you selected them rather than some restaurants right in the township, you know, what your reason for that was. And then just to close, I gave the board a list of questions and suggestions for future endeavors. So thank you, and that's my 2 cents.
And then I think we've got another member of the audience with questions. Please come up, yes. And I forgot to mention, state your name and...
Bill Heckinger, I'm a Ferguson Township resident, and we were working on a plastic bag ban, and so I'd like to encourage these people to keep working on the straw ban and maybe go ahead and get with the plastic bag ban when Corman's ban expires. The progress we made in Ferguson was getting pretty good, and they were about to get something together so they could act on it, and then the ban on the ban came.
Yeah.
So it got tabled. So that's progress in Ferguson. And I believe the supers are going to bring this up as soon as its ban is over. And if not, the citizens will somehow get things going. But we have pretty good supers now, so
Yeah.
That's progress in Ferguson.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Unless anybody else, oh, Elliot, yes, Mr. Abrams.
I think it is important to try to do it on a statewide level. And if each county, for example, had a group like yourself doing this, it might be easier to do, because a company would find it very difficult to, if they're serving, say, all of central Pennsylvania, try and keep track of who can and cannot get a certain product. And so if it became uniform, that problem would go away. So every obstacle that can be overcome brings us closer to the goal of achieving it.
And Jessica.
Would it be useful to work with supply chain management people then too, about that sort of thing, making it efficient and decreasing carbon footprint and stuff? Interesting.
So I'll, unless anybody else has anything, and I have my eye on the clock too, but I'll say that I've reached out to the sustainability planner, Pam Adams. She's the planner over the COG region, 6 municipalities. She's very interested in this, and I've shared her research, your research with her, and also Shelley Mato, who is the refuse and recycling program administrator. Plus, I've been in conversation with people who are in other townships, Ferguson, Supervisor Danini, and then in the borough, Supervisor and now Chair Jesse Barlow. So I think for anything like this to really get any traction, it needs to be region-wide. Yeah, and I think we're taking baby steps right now, but I think every step leads us closer. Thank you so much.
I want to reiterate too, you guys are leaving something, like you did this for a class, but
Yeah.
you're leaving this with us, and it really makes a difference, because when we try to do things like this, people want numbers and research and information. This
Yeah,
is a
thank you.
huge help. And you go on to greener pastures, but we really do use this kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. You're leaving it with us.
And both Pam Adams and Shelley Mato described it that way, that it gives everybody a leg up. Anybody who follows will have that resource. And I'd like to, with the first team that presented, if I could get names of the establishments that you did your study on, so that we could then follow up with the ones, given that we have the time. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Good
Yeah.
job.
Great community.
A+.
Yes. Oh, and I'm in charge here. Sorry about that.
Excuse myself for a second.
Yeah. So yes, I think our next item on the agenda, I'll let Susan Wheeler describe it and then talk about it, introduce it, and I think you're the main attraction, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Susan Wheeler. I'm a Public Works Park project manager here at the township, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the comprehensive recreation parks and open space plan that has just been presented or being given to the municipalities for their review to give comment back to general forum. The reason that I'm giving this is because there was a steering committee that was established early in 2017 with members from each municipality to work on this plan with consultants, and I was the member from Patton Township on that steering committee. The steering committee was made up of 9 members, 1 from each of the 6 municipalities, 1 member from the school district, 1 for Central Region Parks and Rec Authority, 1 from Central Region's Park and Rec Agency, which was the director. And so we were all active members, and the COG executive director sat in on all the meetings to give us advice on all things governmental at the COG level, which was very useful. So through that time, what we did as a committee is we first prepared the RFP and then put out advertisements and conducted all the interviews so that we could hire a consultant who would actually do the work and prepare the study and prepare the report, which we now have before us. The consultant was Sue Landis of Parks and Recreation Solutions and Ann Yost of YSM Landscape Architects. They worked in partnership on the project, and they began in November of 2018. So it's been quite a long process. The budget that we had for them was $75,000, half of which came from a DCNR grant, and the other half were contributions from each of the municipalities. And so their budget was $75,000 for the work that they did on the report that we're now reviewing. In addition to that $75,000, an additional $15,000 was earmarked for the project because it was felt by the steering committee that a community-wide survey should be done to ask questions of each municipality and the Central Region as a whole of their opinions on many of the things that go on that are recreation related in the area. So the consultant, during the whole time they did before they put the document together, went through public meetings. They had 2 public meetings which were held at the high school, one at the beginning of the process and one at the end. They had input from all of the recreation advisory committees from each of the municipalities. They did key person interviews. They did a site and park inventory of all the parks in Central Region. And they did a survey. They did a web survey, and they did then a random survey, which were mailed to randomly selected homes, so it would be statistically significant. The report was given to the general forum in January. The consultants made a presentation at their January meeting, which was just last month. The general forum then asked that the committee, that each municipality review the document and give comments back to them, so that those comments from the municipalities can become part of the document. And so they will then be made an appendix at the end of the document, as the survey is an appendix. Just to give you an idea what the report looks like, that's printed front and back. I would encourage you to read it all. Even if you don't like surveys and statistics, you should read it, because it is filled with a lot of information. It's really meant to be a roadmap and to provide guidelines for the future of Central Region Parks and Rec and its relationship to the municipalities and the responsibilities that it has on its own. It is a document that looks at all of the recreation within the community through all municipalities, but each municipality still, of course, as we know, manages their own parks, builds their own parks, plans their own parks, and has their own process for doing that and their own funding sources. But it's trying to create a roadmap so there's more cohesion between the agency and the municipalities and how we move forward in making sure that all recreational facilities satisfy the needs of all the residents, not only by township, but by Central Region. There are many recommendations. Some of the recommendations will actually require additional study, which means more RFPs, more money to study specific instances of things. Some of the things that are recommended can be implemented probably immediately by Central Region Parks and Rec when it comes to things like proposing changes in fee structure and other things like this, which are really done at a staff level. Those kinds of recommendations they could start to look at implementing in the near term. And many other things will require discussion and agreement by municipalities at the general forum level as well. The plan identifies 14 issues of greatest concern, and they are listed in the agenda, but I would like to read them because I think they do give a good flavor of the kinds of issues that became most apparent and important in terms of how we move forward with recreational facilities and such in the community. There's a need for alternative funding sources by way of saying that they need to look at whether or not there would be more kinds of grants or private funds or any kinds of changes in fee structures that make this a little bit more effective. To look at the aging park structures and deferred maintenance to make sure that all of the parks amenities that we have in Central Region are being maintained correctly so that they don't just start to fall apart. The need for indoor recreation facilities, that recommendation and that issue has arisen because, I don't know if you're aware, but in the past, many groups would use open facilities at the Penn State campus, which are now closed to the public, which has put a great pressure on trying to find indoor facilities for smaller groups and Central Region Parks and Rec programs. Need for additional outdoor facilities, natural resource conservation and sustainability, the large number of fragmented recreation providers, which means there are a lot of Parks and Rec, Central Region Parks and Rec offers a lot of programs, but there are a lot of private agencies that either provide similar programs or duplicate programs, and so there's an overlap in some of these things. The lack of awareness of the region's many parks and the programming, which then is an issue for Parks and Rec to consider and how they get the word out for the community. The need for accessible programs, appropriate level of staffing, which is meant for CRPR, Central Region Parks and Rec. The governance structure, which refers to the agency and the authority and the Parks Capital Committee and all of those other little bits and pieces over there that they need to try to streamline. The need for benchmark data, trail connections and expansion, the efficient use of financial resources, and the division of maintenance responsibilities. Maintenance responsibilities meaning that, as I'm sure you're aware, that when we build parks in Patton Township, if they're in excess of 4 acres in size, we then turn them over to Central Region Parks and Rec, and they do the maintenance, which is mowing the lawns, collecting the trash, and other things. But there's a lot of gray area between what their responsibility should be and what ours still would be, and that needs to be formalized and put together in a written agreement, because that doesn't exist at this point in time. So those are kind of 14 of the highlights of the large document, but I think it gives us a good flavor of the kinds of things that were explored by our consultants when we went through the process. DCNR was a funding agency for the study, so they require that the plan be formally adopted, not just accepted by the COG General Forum. And so it's expected that the comments from each municipality will go back to the executive director at COG by the 17th of March. And then on the March 23rd COG General Forum, the discussions will occur again, and the General Forum will vote on whether or not they'll accept the whole document with the addition of the comments from each municipality, or what their decision will be.
So comments from the board, reactions? Oh, that was a hand.
Yeah, I
Okay,
have two questions.
sorry.
Are we referring to CRPR as the different name yet? Remember when they did the presentation at COG, they had a recommendation for a new way to refer to it?
It's simply Parks and Rec.
Just Parks and Rec? Are we
Well,
supposed to be using that?
no, I think actually that was just part of one of the recommendations, because people in this community either say CRPR
Yeah.
or Central Region Parks and Rec. I think what their proposal was, I mean, they both are the same thing, of course. One is just the initials of the total title. But their point was that when they talked to people in the community and when the surveys were being done, many people, if you said CRPR, they said, what is that? They just thought that that would be a marketing or a branding effort, so to try and make sure consistently everyone calls it Central Region Parks and Rec.
Okay, that part.
Just so that it makes it easier for people to understand who it is.
Right, and then differentiate a little bit from the authority, and what's the difference? And
Yeah,
that
I
kind of
think
thing,
so,
right?
because
That's
I think people
confusing.
say CRPR authority, and they're I mean, the website URL for Parks, Central Region Parks and Rec, of course, is www.crpr.org.
Right.
And so many people, if they don't want to say Central Region's Parks and Rec, they say CRPR. But I think one of the consultants' recommendations was that consistently it should just be called Central Region Parks and Rec. So then people know what they're talking about, so.
I have one other, I wanted to ask you personally, what was something that most surprised you about the recommendations and findings, and what were you least surprised, just based on your expertise and on everything?
Well, I'm not sure I was surprised by any of it.
None of it surprised you, that which is interesting in itself, right?
I have to say that I was very happy that the things that came up kind of at the top level for me is the division of the maintenance responsibilities, which I think is a huge issue.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, and probably from the perspective of the Recreation Advisory Committee.
Sure.
Because you put a tremendous effort into master planning and building parks, and we don't like it if we go to parks and we don't think the maintenance is being kept at a certain level.
Sure.
Certainly, our road crew does certain things for maintenance in the parks, things that Parks and Rec cannot do, or doesn't have the funding or staffing to be able to do. So I don't think that I found anything particularly surprising, but I do think that that issue and the governance structure and the level of staffing are things that are very important in terms of things that matter to us as, as a municipality in our relationship with Central Region Parks and Rec.
Okay, thank you, that's really useful.
Yes, thank you, Susan, for serving on that steering committee and all the hard work your committee did. I know you had many, many meetings.
Yeah, we met monthly all through that time and had additional meetings as well if it had to do with interviews or working on surveys.
So the quality of the project that the consulting group produced, I'm very impressed. My particular, trying to think of the right way to say it, I'm a fiscal conservative, but a social liberal. So on the fiscal conservative side, when I see all these, 14 recommendations?
Yes.
The dollar signs just keep going up and up and up and up and up. And so I'm very concerned about sort of the long-range plan of trying to implement many of these recommendations that are going to cost money from the townships. I understand Parks and Rec has a very good record of obtaining grant support for many of our projects, and that's fantastic. It's great. But it still means that the municipalities have to kick in funds, especially for matching purposes for those grant requests. You know, usually it's 50% or whatever the particular grant requirement is. There are other things that will be coming up soon that are going to require us to kick in a lot more money. The fire department is having a consultant review long-range visibility of a prediction of what's going to happen to our fire protection system as the number of volunteer firemen continue to decline. We may have to start implementing partially paid firefighting force. That's going to be expensive, et cetera. So the Parks and Rec budget in COG is huge. I'm not sure if it's the biggest, certainly one of the largest agencies that require funding from the municipalities. I understand that our citizens want good parks and rec opportunities, and they utilize them. So it's our job to continue to provide those. I'm just doing sort of talking off the top of my head, thinking we're going to have to sit down and try to figure out some long-range strategies and how we're going to raise the money and present it to our citizens, our taxpayers, when it's necessary for to increase the tax rates, because it's around the corner. It's going to come, not this year, or not if not 2021, certainly 2022. We'll probably have to do a tax increase, which means we have to consider how to educate our taxpayers that this is essential. These are services they're asking for and they want, and in order to provide them, it's just going to cost them a little more money.
Yeah, I also think that that's part of the first one that's on here, and these aren't in order of importance of these 14 issues, but the need for alternative funding sources is really meant to be a study where it should be, the Central Region Parks and Rec should start to try to operate as a business so that the need for additional funds from municipalities should not have to increase, but rather that they should start looking at how they can run things so that when they rent fields, that they're actually collecting enough money for all of the costs that, or all the effort and all the work that they put in to get the field to the level of play that a person expects it when they rent it, and those kinds of things. So that's like a benchmark study and also alternative funding sources. So I think that that's a really key part of this document as well. Also bear in mind that the document has a number of different recommendations, and it will be up to the municipalities in their conversations at the general forum, so everyone is in agreement about which of these you'll actually want to investigate further. It may be, I mean, it's not meant that this document shouldn't be utilized at all, but it may be that in the near term and in the short term, only a few items would be considered in this because the agency and the municipalities aren't at the point where they want to explore the more in-depth parts of the study and explore those options in terms of making the program different or better or whatever the case is. So it is something that should be reviewed every 5 years. This is essentially a 10-year plan. But as our Patton Township Parks plan, we do it for 10 years, but we review it every 5 years to make sure that we still have everything in order for our residents' needs. So it's not that everything in this report should be implemented in double quick time.
Right. One final comment. Former Supervisor George Downsborough reviewed this summary, and he was disappointed at the very minute mention of open space, even though the steering committee was
Yes, I'd
called
like to address that.
Parks, Rec, and Open Space Plan.
Well, I'd like to address that because I did ask for them, the consultants, to add a narrative within the context of this report that explained that the title of this report would be somewhat misleading in Patton Township because Patton Township has open space, which is uppercase O, uppercase S, which is completely different from recreational space. It's preserved land. So there is in, I can't tell you what page, but there was the addition of a paragraph to explain that because when this first title was arrived at was before I was on the steering committee. It was when they were first doing the grant applications. They put open space in as the open space within the recreational, active recreational parks. So for example, Circleville Park is all active recreation, but there are lots of areas that you would call open space within Circleville Park. So this is lowercase o, lowercase s. And I have spoken to George about that and did mention that to him, but it wasn't supposed to be an open space inventory at all, as we recognize open space in Patton Township.
I understand. When I read the description, it was clear they were talking about using the open areas, the non-structured open areas of the parks to facilitate like environmental education and environmental...
Well, during the time I was on the steering committee, it was unknown to the other municipalities that we're fortunate in Patton Township to have both open space as one category and recreational parklands as another category, and that they just lump it all together and think it's all the same animal. And we don't do that here. Some of the other municipalities are thinking that perhaps they should separate them by use or by desire because they're two very distinctly different groups of land and use.
And I might add, open space has gotten us into a discussion because it's defined various ways, and whether it's a big S, a little s.
Yes.
Well,
you know, we do have, when we do our parks plan, we talk about open space, lowercase o, lowercase s, because then it's not in conflict with the open space, which is preserved land that is purchased by separate funds and everything else in Patton Township. Also in Patton Township, there's dedicated tax millage for both the parkland and also for open space, which is not done in other municipalities. I believe that in Half Moon they may have an open space fund, but they don't have a parkland fund. So Patton Township is unique in the fact that it has dedicated tax millages for both those categories of land.
So I think it's a generally misunderstood term.
And so that title came up whenever they did the grant application in the first place, which was, I don't know who worked, well, I know Pam Salkang's worked on it, but I don't know how they came up with that as a title. Well, the other thing we discussed at the steering committee was that even calling it the Center Region Comprehensive Recreation Parks and Open Space Plan had a little bit of ambiguity to it, because some people would say if they live in, some people might not even really understand what the geographical delineation of Center Region is. So there's difficulty with that.
Nomenclature can get us into a lot of difficulties.
Go ahead.
Oh. Ms. Wheeler, I had the opportunity to go to the newly elected orientation, and one of the presenters happened to be the director of Recreations and Park. And he saw my name, and he was saying, he was trying to look where I was from. And when he said Patton Township, he said, oh my God, you guys have one of the best maintained parks around. And coming from him, I was very proud of being from Patton Township. But then, as he's telling the other presenters how great I maintain our parks are, it really gave me, and I want to express that to your group and the maintenance people in Public Works and whoever is in charge of keeping our parks up. Thank you.
Well, the majority of our parks are maintained by Central Region Parks and Rec.
Well, thank you.
And so they do a good job. And then we do some certain things with our own road crew, which are Patton Township employees. The smaller parks that we have, they're less than 4 acres, we maintain ourselves. But all of the design and master planning and work like that is done by the Recreation Advisory Committee, which is the Patton Township.
Thank you. I mean, there were newly elected officials from all over Pennsylvania, and for him to point out Patton Township.
Well, we've
that
got
was
some really great
amazing.
parks.
Thank you.
And I'm not biased.
Thank you.
That was Wes Ferner.
Yeah, I'm sure it's Wes. Well, Wes loves our parks. We do
Thank
some
you.
very nice parks here.
One of Susan's job duties is to make sure Center Region Parks and Rec are doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's right. So they know me too.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I make sure if there are things going on that aren't just up to standard, we take care of it through our
Being the
own.
new kid on the block, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yes.
I think in line with Pamela's comment, though, it would be a good idea if we actually gave some praise to our workers who work on the parks,
Yeah.
so they know that it's appreciated.
Yes, and also note that in the 10 or 15 years ago, and they don't do it so much now, but when we were doing park renovations, we were using our road crew to do some of those construction projects if they were small enough that we didn't have to bid them out to larger contractors. And they do a very good job with the parks that they maintain that are the smaller parks of ours. And when things happen in parks that need to be taken care of, they're always right on it. They don't hesitate, so they're great.
I think what we as a municipal board are supposed to do is to accept this.
Well,
No, what they're asking is that the board, each municipality provide comments back to the general forum for their March meeting. So it's up to the board to make comment on the committee or ask the REC to make comments,
right.
or both of you can have comments.
Yeah, I think it's suggested that we refer it to the Recreational Advisory Committee. the
Yes,
RAC, and get comments from them. And then my understanding is that we have then 2 additional meetings at which this will be discussed. So I think at this point, we need to talk about the process of getting those comments back. We give them right to you and then have them
Yeah, I
available
think
for discussion at the meeting.
Well, yeah, you should bring your comments. If you have further comments, look over the report. Provided we got a brand-new version of the report with some additional data, so that's available.
It was
to look
only
at.
different in the fact that in the survey report that was the addendum, they had missed or had omitted some of the Patton Township survey data, which was important for me, so I asked them to insert that. So that was the only
Yeah,
difference to that.
so bring your comments, if you have comments, back to one of the next 2 meetings. Also, staff's recommendation is to refer it to the RAC. Susan will take it to them. They meet next week.
We meet next week, and I didn't send the agenda out today for them because I wanted to have this meeting first, but when I send the agenda tomorrow, we'll go through everything, so their recommendations are made at their meeting next week, and then it'll be given back to you for your next meeting.
Yeah, and then you can endorse those comments as you like, or,
If
and
you
I
want-
assume you want to include George's comment also in our comments back to the executive director.
Can I just ask about the RAC? Have most of them read this and/or participated in this? I know that you've
Well,
been on the
they've known
committee.
about it as we've gone through the process.
Right.
Because as we had draft chapters of things that I thought would be of specific interest to them,
You
I
get
had
the
provided to them.
Perfect.
I also provided them this draft report.
I think they've had the
right
same
after-
access you.
Yeah, the
Right,
same
okay.
access. So after it was, went to the general forum, I gave them the full report and told them to put their reading glasses on.
Yeah, really. And what date is your meeting next week? Just so I don't have to-
Tuesday, the 18th, is it 18 on Tuesday?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And the RAC I'll have them make all their comments that they want to make on this report at that meeting. We'll discuss it. So they'll be available, so that can be given back to you in print, or if you prefer, they could come and present them by,
I think
Just
if
in
you have
print?
Print's fine.
Okay.
So we'll have it prior to the agenda too.
yes, you'll have them. You'll have them actually, well, I'll have them like the day after the
Yeah,
meeting. So you'll
we have
them.
it by the 21st.
Yeah, you can have them Wednesday, and then you'll have them for the next meeting.
Okay. And is it unreasonable to ask this board to have comments ready by the 26th of February? I don't know what we have on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, we won't go through the whole
No.
presentation
Obviously,
again.
yeah.
We'll just, we'll review the RAC comments
Okay.
and then see if the board has any other comments at that point.
Yeah, and then what they
Or
want.
if you have questions,
Okay.
again, you could pose those questions if Susan or I can't answer them, we can send them back to, see if Parks and Rec has a response.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And then I think General Forum wants to see it in a list, of comments in whatever manner, because they'll put comments from each municipality as an appendix to the document. And then it will be the work of the General Forum for those heavy-duty lifting type items in here that will take additional
somewhat in
studies.
response to Dan's question, if you look in the full report, I think at the end, right before the appendix, there's 3 or 4 pages
Yes.
of detailed recommendations.
Yes.
Which I think from Dan's point, there's probably over 100 recommendations in there when you look at that. And that, how does one go about starting that process? So.
Okay, great. So we've got our marching orders. We're officially.
You have your homework.
Pardon, yes.
By consensus of the board, it's been referred to the RA.
Okay. Well, it'll go on the agenda, and then we'll
Well,
discuss
somebody
it
wants
next
to make
week,
a
and you'll have it back.
We don't need a motion, you say? Okay.
No, I
Yes,
didn't.
did you have a question? Then?
It wasn't in the purview of the report to tell us which recommendations we should and shouldn't make, right? It was just to give us, that's not the purview of the plan. Just the list, not to necessarily tell us how to pick them? That wasn't my sense. I thought that was
No.
like next.
It's not that, no, it's not that you have to pick them. I think that the idea was you should read the report and give back your general comments and what you think is important in the report or not important, or whatever your comments would be after reading it.
I mean more like the
It
task.
may be useful to look through that long list and,
No,
if you
I'm
have some
asking-
priority items you think are priorities.
I'm asking whether there was the task of the actual document is to narrow it down, or is it more to get
No.
a picture of all of it, right? That
At
would be the
this point, it
next-
was
all
not
right.
part of the scope of services
Okay,
to
that's
put
what I
together
was- yeah.
a
Okay.
prioritized
Right,
list.
that is our
Okay.
next step of it.
But I don't think it would be, I think it would be all right if you made comment on what you thought were most important things in there,
Yeah.
because I suspect that the RAC will do that.
Similar
I
to
think
your
that they'll
question
look
to
at it and
Susan.
say, this is all very nice, but we should be
Right,
concentrating on A, B, and C, because that's how they are.
Perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we knew the process from here on out. Okay. Great.
Okay?
You
Thank
might
you, Susan.
See if there's any other
Amazing
public
document.
comments.
Right,
Right.
thank you.
See if there are any more public comments.
Oh, I'm sorry. I almost forgot about the public comment. Public comments? Thank you. None? Seeing none? Okay. I forgot about that public. Thank you so much. Yes, really masterful document. Very thoughtful. So it brings us to public safety, and I believe that is Chief Jolly. Yes.
Thank you.
Police update?
Yeah, a copy of the January 2020 police report was included in your agenda materials. You'll see that we had 112 traffic stops, wrote 38 citations, 3 parking tickets, and had 14 criminal arrests. Again, no bike patrol in the month of January. A few of the highlights from some of the arrests that we had. The department arrested a 32-year-old male for felony burglary, criminal trespass, misdemeanor, simple assault, terroristic threats. The defendant entered an apartment that did not belong to him and assaulted and threatened the resident there. A 39-year-old female was arrested for possession of controlled substance as a result of a traffic stop. The officers found that she had warrants out for her arrest, and upon taking her into custody, found that she had drugs and drug paraphernalia on her person and in her bag. A 23-year-old male was arrested for stalking and harassment. He was the ex-boyfriend of a victim who repeatedly made unwanted contact with her, including showing up at her residence and knocking on her door for over an hour. And then we had a 19-year-old male who was arrested for possessing drug paraphernalia following a traffic stop for speeding. The officer who stopped approached the car, smelled the odor of marijuana, searched the car, and found the drug paraphernalia inside the car. We had 3 individuals arrested for retail theft, 3 arrested for DUI, and 3 arrested for possessing drug paraphernalia. Our department successfully served 2 warrants of the 13 that we attempted. Some of the community relations, we had Officer DeSalle did a Girl Scout tour. Officer Schaefer, who was recognized here just shortly ago, presented a program on DUI and drug recognition to the State College area high school students who are enrolled in the driver's ed program. He has done that for many years now and continues getting invited back. They really enjoy him presenting that to the students. And of course, again, we were very active in the school zones. The next few pages, we have a few letters of appreciation. I'm not going to go all the way through them. Some of them are a little lengthy. The first one, though, was from an individual who had a flat tire was driving on their spare tire, and of course the spare tire blew as well. So they, one of our officers just happened upon them, put their lights on behind, waited for the tow truck to come. They just really appreciated how professional, how thoughtful, and the safety for having the vehicle.
Do we know who that was?
I'm sorry?
Do we know who the officer was? Or?
That was Officer McElrath.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then the next was for a couple officers. I believe it was Officer Finocchio and Officer Vardzell, helping out with the Out of the Cold program when it was up at the Good Shepherd Catholic Church. An individual that was a little unruly, so they really appreciated the officer's professionalism in coming and helping out with that situation and got it calmed down. And then lastly, I believe actually it was from a member of our planning commission sent a happy Police Appreciation Day, so I just included that as well. So, some of the training and department activities for the month of January, all of the police officers, the sworn staff, received our update training that we have to get every year for CPR, AED, and oxygen administration and first aid. Obviously that comes in handy from earlier, you heard that. Officer Schaefer presented the classes he does for the State College Area High School. We have 2 officers who are currently certified accident reconstructionists, and within the next 2.5 years they're both going to be gone. They're both retiring. So we're in the process of getting a couple officers trained up. The training to get to accident reconstructionist is about a month and a half. So there's a lot of training that goes into that. Officer Caitlin Basala and Officer Elijah Vardzell volunteered for that, and they went through the very first week-long training. Just today I signed them up for the 2-week second level. Hopefully they're going to get into that this summer. It's all free training provided by PSP. It's just a matter of us getting them there and then having the manpower to cover the schedule while they're gone. We had tactical team training, and then the other big thing that really happens at the beginning of the year for the police department is our yearly in-service training. I listed some of the topics that we had this year, including autism awareness, diversity, incident command, drug awareness, hazardous materials, case law update from the DA's office, infection control, motorcycle gangs, and officer wellness. So a very broad spectrum for 2 days worth of training that we had there. And then we had a couple officers attend armor training for some of the weapons that we utilize in the agency. I attended a mental health task force meeting, met with a student who's completing her master's paper, and she had some questions and wanted to bounce some ideas off of me for her project that she's doing for her master's paper. Attended the Patton Township Business Association lunch meeting, attended a DLAN, or the disaster LAN software that's coming through Center Region EMA, and then also the Center County Chiefs meeting and the Campus Community and Union meeting. The last 5 pages, I believe, are the call list that we have for our calls for service. We had 428 in the month of January. That's up a little bit from the 404 we had in December, with the most frequent call being traffics this month, so kind of a sway from some of the other months. Most importantly, I want to let everybody know that yesterday we opened up our applications for our police testing. So we will be testing for a police officer. The written test is scheduled for April 11th. You can go on to our website, twp.patton.pa.us. There's links that take you to all the information there. You can always email us at police@township.patton.pa.us. Feel free to come in person, or if you reach out any of those ways, reach our office, we'll happily mail you a copy of our applications as well. So, hoping to get a lot of good candidates to come take the test. The tentative oral dates for the oral boards are the end of April, 1st of May. So, looking to hopefully have somebody ready to go by maybe midsummer. So.
We do not need police academy training.
We do not. No, we don't require it.
We're looking for dedicated people with the right attitudes, and we'll train you.
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. And this is just for our...
For Patton.
Just for Patton Township, yes.
We have one opening.
We have
a new
one addition,
slot.
and then Officer Jeff Shoemaker will be retiring in December, so we'll plan to replace him as well from this list.
Okay. Can you give a brief overview of what the testing is like? If it's
Sure.
not
Certainly. Yeah. So the process, I gave it to my wife to proofread the other day, and she's like, "That is a long process." It's really not that bad. There's about 14 steps, but the very first of which is the written test. Essentially, there's a mathematics section, a reading comprehension, but it's a standardized police test. The State College Borough is offering the same exact test as
They just recently
they're hiring.
There's a study manual that's provided.
Yeah, there's a study manual, and actually there's a website that the information we provide candidates when they apply. You can actually go and take a practice test, and the company gives you feedback to maybe help enhance your score and do a little bit better when you take the actual written test. But yeah, so essentially we do a written test, we send the tests away to be graded by the company, so an independent company does those, get the results back, and we notify the top 20 candidates that they are eligible to come in for the oral interview and for a physical fitness test. We go through that process, and then we kind of narrow it down to our list of eligible candidates that will come before the board. So.
Okay.
The oral interviews are pretty intense.
Yes.
We ask a lot of hard questions of candidates. We want to make them think,
Yeah.
and want to make sure that they have the right attitude.
Yeah.
Police work, you got to be able to think on your feet. So we fire a lot of questions at them and make them not impossible, but make them difficult and make them have to use their minds quickly. So,
Yeah.
If my memory serves me correctly, I think the board also approved a new half-time staff position. What's the status on finding someone?
That's correct. So we were waiting to kind of hear from one of our full-time secretaries to see what her desire is moving forward. I think she was considering taking the part-time position, and she just recently let it known to us that her desire is to go to the part-time position. So we'll be looking to hire somebody full-time, and I'll probably be advertising that very shortly within the next week or so.
Very good.
Yep.
A lot of good things. Good things. Okay. I just have a quick question about the coronavirus. Has that entered into any conversations that you're having in training?
Nothing yet. In fact, actually, I take that back, because the in-service training that we just did, again, another requirement that we have is a yearly update in infectious disease control.
Yeah.
So we actually have an infectious disease officer, Cindy Yost, through LifeLink EMS. So she did discuss the coronavirus and how we should not be worried about it. Basically, it was her message to us. So.
It's on Penn State's radar.
Yeah.
So Penn State and Mountain Indy Medical Center have at least talked about it.
Yeah, I'm just guessing. It's out there.
I just had my annual wellness physical this morning, and one of the first questions he asked was, have you been out of the country within the last month? Have you or one of your close contacts been out of the country within the last month? So they are screening.
Yeah, I have the same thing. Yeah. They've been doing that for a while. Usually it's often specific countries, but okay. It's on everybody's radar. Great, so next we come up to the resolution on the radar used by local police. So I'm just going to, Doug, you want to?
Yeah, I think the quick story is we looked at a sample resolution last meeting. We've gone through the information available. At this point, we've put together a resolution for the board to consider to take action on. And if you have additional questions, Chief and I will strive to answer them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we need to, is there any discussion on the part of the board about the draft resolution? Did anybody have any comments or the public?
Well, I think we can have a motion and a second and then have a discussion. So I'll move that we accept or pass resolution number 2020-03.
Second. Any comments, any discussion on that?
We had quite a bit of discussion at our last meeting.
Yeah.
All in favor of supporting such a resolution?
Oh, okay, yes.
I'm saying we had significant discussion
did,
already.
yes.
I don't have anything new to add.
I just wondered if anybody had any question about the specific resolution.
If you're interested, there are hot links on that form that take you right to our senators and representatives. You want to contact them. All the info's there, so.
It looks great to me. My only comment would be, it's a resolution that doesn't have teeth necessarily. I like the links. Is there some way we can put that in the newsletter, or or maybe if we wanted to bring it before COG, suggesting other people do the same thing? That's certainly not our problem. It's all over Pennsylvania, and it sounds pretty drastic.
We should take a vote on this to officially approve.
Okay, thank you. So those in favor
We'll
of,
we'll get Mr.
Oh, thank you.
Abrams' vote later.
I'll get this down.
No, he said it'll last for the.
I'm sorry, then I'll get
later.
it, I'll get that down too. I think I'm not hearing you.
So we can go ahead, the four of us can vote.
So, all those in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, aye, those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, sorry about that. So we are now on to football traffic, and is that going to be?
Yeah, no, that's me.
Oh, okay.
And I'll just make this a brief update. Penn State has started planning for the 2020 season. They haven't finalized their football traffic plan yet, but they did ask what would be my opinion if they added additional parking spaces to the north route. I went back and looked at the information that I had provided last year. We had took traffic counts throughout the football season. One of the findings that came out was game day traffic is less than our normal weekday traffic. So we definitely didn't have any real issues. There were some backups on Toftree Avenue due to the checkpoint location at the intersection of Toftree and Fox Hollow. So in essence, at this point, I have told Penn State that I believe they can add some spaces to the north zone. I would like them to limit that to no more than 3,500 parking spaces. I think there were like 2,400 last year. So there is some increase. One of the other things I learned is the ingress is spread out more than what I had assumed. So even for a noon game, we don't get a big surge in any 1 hour. So Penn State has not, as I said, has not finalized what they're wanting to do. They know they had issues with the west zone, in and out of the west zone, and that's part of what moving some of those spaces to the north zone will help alleviate that. Chief Jolly had reported, I think, late that, having the two officers on duty before and after the game were quite helpful in keeping traffic moving and assisting PSP when needed. One thing we did have asked athletics to consider is moving that checkpoint down Fox Hollow Road to a point somewhere near I-99. They haven't committed to that yet, but we'll keep asking and keep mentioning it. At this point, unless you have questions, there's no need for board action or anything. Once Penn State has finalized their plan or given me any more information, I'll be back and update you on where they're at and what our opinion is of what they're planning to do.
Yeah, it just seemed to me that they liked the checkpoint at the intersection of Toftree and Fox Hollow because somebody coming down Fox Hollow.
Yeah, if they move it down to by I-99, there's plenty of room down there
To make a U-turn.
to make a U-turn because there's some big gravel areas. It's where, what Hollow Road? Big Hollow. Yeah, Big Hollow Road goes intersection down there. So just to report to where we're at, and we're waiting for Penn State to finish what they're doing.
Okay, great, thanks. So we're moving on to the parking prohibition on Toftree Avenue, and I'm guessing it's one of our engineers here? Yes, Lieutenant.
Good evening. Good evening. Hi, Alexandra Castrocini, Assistant Township Engineer. What you have before you is an ordinance change to prohibit parking on Toftree Avenue from at the station and on Highwoods at Toftree, so both sides of the road, and 250 feet down Toftree Avenue towards Cricklewood. The reason for it is there's an adequate sight distance. When you're at the station and trying to turn right, it's very, very difficult to see. So we recognize that. I believe police also recognize that, and actually at a meeting with CATA last week, they asked me about it. So it's on everyone's radar. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Advertised and ready to pass if the board wants to take action.
Okay, seems
So
research.
moved.
Seconded. Any discussion? Any comments from the audience? If not, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Resolution carried. We don't need a public hearing for that?
No, only zoning matters
Okay,
need public hearings.
okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Hang around
Moving
there.
on.
Okay. The Top Trees Avenue Corridor Improvement Project, we're looking at the survey results. Doug, do you want to?
I'll look.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're still up here.
I'm staying here for a while.
Okay, I'll just look up there.
So basically, the update is you have the survey responses in the packet. The two largest, I guess the two most interesting were the fact that people wanted to see dedicated off-road bike path, and a pedestrian lighting were two things that were very strongly highlighted in the survey results. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. But there's no action required at this time.
So the only question I have, unless anybody else has one, is whether there's any cost and value of conducting a random sample survey. Probably not. It's
My
certainly not on the
opinion
scale
is
of the Parks and Rec.
My opinion is you won't get much different
Okay.
results.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I mean, yeah,
Okay.
you can't stand up and say this is a statistically significant sampling,
Right.
but for the numbers we got, I think we're in pretty good
Okay,
shape.
yeah,
I think we
I
have
thought
a
it
pretty
was
good.
a very good response.
A pretty good sense of what the public thinks.
And how did you advertise for it, or push
We
it out?
sent multiple emails out through Public Works to everyone on our
Yeah.
email list.
Yeah.
Did you get them all?
We conducted an open house here, that we
Yes.
invited the
Oh, that's right,
residents
of course,
to.
duh, yeah.
Yes.
So next steps, we'll be meeting, staff, we'll be meeting back with the consultants next week or the
Yeah.
week after.
Beginning of March.
Yeah, and look over what they've done, and then I think probably within the next, if not in March, in April, we'll probably be back before the board with what
Okay.
their preliminary recommendations are for for improvements through that corridor we've been looking at.
Mhm, great.
Yes.
I guess with the pedestrian lighting, the question was about lighting for pedestrians, right?
Correct.
But I think that we should consider promoting pedestrians to wear clothing that is
Reflective.
reflective at night. I guess we can't require it now, but I mean, if you're going to drive, your vehicle has to have certain lights and taillights, reflective things, and if you're going to use a crosswalk, maybe it's not out of the question for people to have to be seeable.
Yeah, that makes good sense to me.
So lighting of the pedestrians as well as for the pedestrians. I like it. Okay. So it looks like you're on, any other discussion on the corridor? Because I think then we're on to Cricklewood Drive.
Yes.
And that situation, traffic calming.
So at the last board meeting, we had a map on the board showing proposed locations for speed humps. I've been working with Phil Park since early December on this topic. So as we have up on the screen, we talked about having an open house to discuss potential traffic calming on Cricklewood Drive. So we have the initial request by Phil, his concern with speeding, data collection, identifying project area, confirming that there is a speeding issue with numbers. Are there other issues in the area? And then initiating a neighborhood survey online. I've already started with SurveyMonkey, putting a list of questions on there, so that's already started. So at the open house, we would review the survey results, propose alternative treatments or measures, review the survey results, identify alternatives at that time, have a public hearing. So there's a whole list of process after that. If you have any questions, we'd probably need to set a date if we're going to have an open house.
Yeah, we'll talk to Toftrees. I think we'll try to have it out at the resort, make it as convenient for the residents as possible.
Right.
Yeah, nice, yeah.
Or if you have any other thoughts or questions.
So, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just on your potential survey questions, I assume you're probably going to do this already, but the third from the bottom where you mentioned other treatments, gateway, bulb valves, chicane, et cetera, I assume you're going to have a definite
Graphics, explanation.
describe what those are.
Yes.
If people don't know what they are. just
Yes,
by
I saw that on our top tree survey, that people had questions about what's this and that. Yeah, we have to define everything in the survey.
And I noticed that Mr. Parks had a concern about offering the option of,
Yes, I guess years ago, there were speed humps on
Right.
top of
Yeah,
Cricklewood.
well,
we didn't want to prejudice
yeah,
people.
They weren't the
without
same
being-
kind
Yeah.
of speed humps. He's worried it's gonna,
Skew the,
yeah.
yeah, if we don't ask right now, we probably may add another step to that whole process.
Yeah,
You know, we thought if we asked, because that was Phil's first recommendation, if we ask now, we could it either stays on the list or goes off the list, I guess. But we can make it more general, but we may end up adding another step back in there to eliminate alternatives again. I mean, it's going to run a little bit like the Toftrees President intersection is.
Right.
You'll go
Yeah.
through, you'll have a top, you may
Yeah,
have one or
exactly.
two top-rated alternatives, and then when you start identifying exactly what it is, they don't become quite as attractive as they originally were thought, so.
You have to have-
It's a funneling process to some
Okay.
extent, and, you know, the wider you open the funnel to start with, the longer it takes you to get to the end of the funnel, so. We'll discuss that with Pete or with Phil, and unless you have opinions about it one way or the other.
I was just going to suggest if there's some way you could link, so obviously link to pictures or even
Yes.
link to little videos. I mean, believe it or
I
not,
started
actually,
working on that.
I found that traffic calming, those pictures kind of fascinating because I never heard about them.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do
Yeah.
traffic calming. We're not
Exactly,
married
yeah.
to one way.
Yeah, but I think having that physical, that three-dimensional sense of it, as well as
Mm-hmm.
the auditory sense of it, and you don't get that until you try it on for size, I think.
Yeah. So,
Great, yeah. It looks,
Okay, we'll
looks good.
continue working with Mr. Park, and as Alexandria said, we'll get the open house scheduled there at some time in the next 4 weeks or so.
any other questions for me?
No, thank you, not for me. at all.
So I'm going back to my seat.
There you go, okay, so
Back of the nosebleeds. There.
thank you. That's clear. The kids' table, we used to call it.
Oh.
That's the Thanksgiving dinner, you
It was
know.
getting a little crowded up there.
That was always the best place to sit, I don't know.
Oh, can I say thank you for identifying what the attachments are with the red item? It is super helpful, by the way.
Yeah, whoever did that.
Good call.
Yeah,
Thank you.
as long as I don't change the numbering as I build
But
the
it's super
agenda, that's what I
helpful.
found.
I
If-
imagine.
I shouldn't number them as I put them together, I should wait till the end and then number them all.
It was really helpful, though, thank you.
Our interior.
Little
decorator,
things make all the difference.
Designer.
Sorry.
So planning and zoning, I guess we don't have much to discuss, except that the real action is going to be in the next planning commission session. it looks
Yeah,
like.
Planning Commission had nothing to review this month, so they're taking a break, but we did get 2 sets of plans in for retail development, both first phase of Patton Crossing and the last phase of the Colonnade. When Patton Crossing, we did send out an email blast to everybody that we knew was interested in for the Patton Crossing.
Okay.
And those things will be on the Planning Commission agenda in March. And
Okay.
you should see them at your March meeting also.
Okay, but you put out the e-blast to notify them of the planning commission.
Yep,
meeting also.
yep, and that plan is available, it's up on our website.
Great.
If anybody wants, all the documents that we have are up there on the website and available for review and download.
Great, okay, thank you. So it'll be a happening planning commission meeting. And under administration, Elliot and I conducted a number of interviews over the last week for people who are interested in serving on either authority boards or commissions. And
We had far more qualified people than the positions.
we did, as usual. I think one is for Jessica. and one is for- Okay, great, thanks, Doug. So I'm going to turn it over to Elliot to announce. Am I?
Are you?
Yeah, I don't mind doing it. But since I'm the chair.
You can.
Okay. So,
I make a motion that the chair read these. But
Don't we have to
I'll
vote?
help congratulate.
That's
them.
fine, okay. So, yeah, it was a difficult procedure, and it was also somewhat complex because there were a number of positions that people had expressed an interest in, and then we had needs in various areas and not in other areas. So, I think the toughest decision of all was for the Planning Commission, where we chose William Burnett, who has been on the Zoning Hearing Board for a number of years and came with a number of ideas. And he's very familiar also with code and safety from his work on the fire, in the fire department. And then also Kelly Prescott, who has a lot of experience in managing large projects, and she asked a lot of questions that were sort of the big picture question. For our open space, oh, that's right, we did just the three. So for the Open Space Stewardship Committee, we have Lisa Price, who and I'm excited because each person on this Open Space Stewardship Committee has an area of expertise in the natural world that they'll bring to the committee. Lisa is an ornithologist by training, by hobby, and a biologist by training. Ralph Muma is a
Renaissance man.
a Renaissance man by, I guess a chemist by training, but
Yeah.
a Renaissance man by self-teaching, and an entomologist by self-teaching. And then Jim Savage, who is a forester, and just had all sorts of ideas, thinking outside the box, and we had a hard time reining him in with his ideas. So just clear one seat, one vacant, one term.
Yeah, and then-
Okay, and there may be one other seat.
Yeah,
Is that what it
when
is?
the board goes to make a motion, if they do, they include that we've had the person who was appointed to seat one has been to 2 meetings in more than 2 years, only
Right.
2 meetings in more than 2 years. And
Right.
we tried to contact him recently to see what his plans were. We have not heard back from him, so we've asked that the board include that, make that seat vacant, and then we can fill that one also.
Yeah, yeah. And then for the zoning hearing board, we chose Andrea Pandolfi, who is a certified appraiser of properties, so she's very familiar with zoning terminology. And in fact, though she hasn't come before a hearing board, she's very familiar with the, who's the solicitor who would be the zoning.
Jeff Stover.
Yeah, she's done some work with him, or is very familiar with him. For the zoning hearing board alternate, Linda Lockbaum, who has had a number of years' experience in various committees and was just interested in continuing that. So we chose her as an alternate.
No, yeah, still, and then one empty spot there.
And with one empty spot there. And
We'll have to fill you up.
yeah, and just so everybody here knows, the zoning hearing board has 3 full-time people, but when a case is brought to the zoning hearing board, there's a finite amount of time that we have to address it without, and if we don't address it at that point, then it's automatically granted to the person who requests. So we need those alternates on call anytime. So any comments?
Well, I'll move that we accept the recommendations for these appointments,
Second.
so we can have discussion.
Okay. Any comments, any observations, any? Then I would ask for, we asked for motions, so I'll call for a vote. So all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Nay? I mean, opposed would say nay. You had a question, Jessica? Okay. Good. So our next item is actually concerning a set of committees that we all go to as members of this board, and these are committees at COG. We all chose a committee for us, knowing that there were, when we did the choosing, there were only 4 of us, knowing that there would soon be a 5th. So I don't know if, Pam, if you have any thoughts about any committees that you'd be interested in being on?
Public safety and transport, land use.
And I was thinking that,
Those are good ones.
yeah, the transportation, is that what you said? Yeah.
And public safety.
So I would actually recommend 2 committees instead of 3, I think.
She only picked 2.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard you.
Public safety and transportation and land use.
Oh, I forgot the land use was a
If
public.
transportation and land use were separated, there'd be 2 committees.
There, thank you, my bad, and my out of it, so. Great, and so,
I'm
do we
happy
need
to
to do any
relinquish
other
my
shifting?
participation in one of these, since I'm on 3, so
Yeah,
public
perfect.
safety is great. So if Jess still wants to be the alternate, that's
Sure.
fine.
That's fine.
Okay.
And then TLU also?
Yeah, TLU.
I think that's great. That's one of my favorites.
They do good stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll report that to COG.
So that means you're not on, so Elliot, you're just on the executive, which has got a pretty tall order this spring. Right.
He's also the alternate on finance.
Right, okay, gotcha. Okay.
I'd rather be the alternate on TLU rather than finance.
Okay. So did you get that? Elliot wants to be the alternate on
TLU.
on TLU, and then I guess I could be,
Could be the alternate for,
I'm at the alternate on Parks and Capital, I'm in the I've been going to executive committee meetings.
Pam, would you be
But
interested
I don't mind.
in alternate on public services and environment? That way she's a
Mhm.
member of 2 and then
Mhm.
alternate
Yep.
in the 3rd.
Great.
Who would be the alternate on finance then?
Yeah, who's the alternate on finance?
You are.
Volunteers.
Elliot said he would rather be,
Elliot, you're the alternate on finance.
but Elliot said he wanted to be the alternate on TLU and not on finance.
Rather than,
Oh, okay, I got it.
Just as long as you're here for the budget hearings, I'll be the alternate on that.
On finance?
Yeah, the one,
Larry goes to all those meetings too.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
okay.
all right.
I don't know. George disappeared on the first
He
year.
keeps showing up with his comments, so why didn't
I
he come
know,
back?
I know.
He's watching.
He'll never leave us. So that brings us to the consent agenda, and unless there are any questions, I'll just take a,
Yeah, there was
oh, sure.
one change to the minutes for the January 22nd regular
Right.
meeting. We had, the board did take action to change the date of the July meeting to July 15th. So
Right.
you can correct it with that amendment, or approve it with that
But
amendment.
Oh, right, but that was, okay, that was already noted in
Yeah,
the agenda
it came
supplement
out
too.
today, yeah,
Okay,
the supplement.
so I'll seek a
I move
motion
that we accept the consent agenda
Second.
with the amendment as noted.
with the amended minutes.
Second as amended.
Any discussion? Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. That brings us to the manager's report.
Census Day is still April 1st. It has not moved. You should get your first notice from Census around March 10th. You'll be asked to opt in to either answering online or by mail, or you can do it, there's a phone option, I believe, also. Penn State is hosting an event on February 19th. Second Lady of Pennsylvania, Giselle Fetterman, will be talking about her experience as an undocumented immigrant and providing people with all the reasons why they should participate in the census. It's important to be counted. That makes a difference on how much federal monies we receive here, not only for Patton Township, but also for Center County and the state of Pennsylvania. Is there any questions? If not, I'll move on. Our calendar of upcoming events is there. I'll quickly scroll through. We are closed next Monday for President's Day. ABC dinner is the 21st at Toff Trees. We're trying to finalize the list, so make sure you RSVP back to Luana. PML North Central League meetings are April 14th in Lewisburg. If anybody's interested in attending, let me know and we'll get you signed up. Again, I included the snow parking and shoveling things. I don't know if anything's accumulating on the pavement out there or not. Elliot says it is going to get cold on Friday. So.
It'll get warm first and melt the snow.
Okay. We will be enforcing snow shoveling for the rest of the winter also, so remind everybody. Last item I had on one of the supplements that Dan and I and Pam are going to a reception for Senator Corman on Tuesday, February 18th. I'll email you too, and we'll make arrangements. We'll carpool down there. I think at least Corman's name came up about plastic bags earlier tonight, so maybe that's one thing we can at least poke him about. But we'll also be there asking him for money for grants and all those things too. So we will be attending. If you have anything else you want Dan and Pam to talk to the senator about, go ahead and let them know.
Radar resolution.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we got that.
We will take a copy of that for him. That's the end of my report.
Great. We're up to committee reports. Dan, I'm just going to have you go first, unless you want, so we don't forget it at the end. It's listed on that.
Well, finance meets tomorrow, so I don't have a committee report on it.
So we covered that one, okay. Elliot, transportation and land use.
One of the biggest transportation projects will be the continuation of the upgrading and changing of Atherton Street, and this time it'll be going through the borough and then out the southeast side. We also learned that general funding for bridge projects and road projects will be level or down over the next year, but there is funding available for additional projects that might involve mass transit. Didn't hear any specific proposals. One that I made, though I don't expect it to happen, is that since we need a connector from town to the airport, that if it was done with, say, a high-speed rail link or even a low-speed rail link, that would be a type of thing that could be added if we wanted to do that. But that's something we haven't, region hasn't really talked about that too much.
We get money to put in a rail link out there and then just build a 3-lane maintenance road next to it.
That's right. That'd be, exactly. That's what they have in Chicago with the CTA gun.
Wow.
The airport to downtown.
That'd be pretty exciting. Sell tickets. Let's see. Oh, so I guess, yeah, I'm next, public services and environment. The, yeah, so UAJA, it's a request for They
Yeah,
are.
ignore the highlighting.
Pardon, yeah, they're exploring a parcel of property that is in Benner Township that is served by another sewer authority or water authority, whatever they call it, actually crossing Spring Creek or going under Spring Creek and being served then by UAJA. It's much closer to that. But the real issue is the cost of nutrient. You have to pay to have the nutrient capacity reduced to meet environmental standards, and it's quite expensive. It's a complex issue. I will say that we will be getting, the committee will be getting a detailed sort of tutorial on that to help us better understand it and make a decision. The greenhouse gas emissions inventory and reduction targets, Pam Adams will be coming around to the various municipalities. It'll be, the next meeting, I think. So she will have a presentation on that, and of course, the next step for all of us will be to make decisions on where we want to make those reductions and what that's going to cost us to do. And the last item was whether to change the start date for recycling and refuse pickup in the summer so that the workers are not as stressed, so that they start early, finish early, start in the cool of the day. We have tabled that, and the main reason is they want to change the start time from 7 to 6 in the morning when it's cooler, but a lot of municipalities have ordinances preventing early trash pickup. So you're getting more information.
Is this for residential trash or
It's
for
residential
business trash?
Residential.
Okay, because they're out there at 6 for business trash.
Right, and I think the people who are most concerned about it are those in the rural areas. If they're coming at 6, they either have to be out there with their trash or they put it out the night before, and they're concerned about animals. The point was made that Park Forest also has animals, so it's not just the rural areas.
Betsy? One other thing I forgot to mention in the transportation report is that some of the people were saying that if we were trying to pick projects to work on for safety improvement, can we get better accident data for where they've occurred and what caused them, so that we might be able to specify those places that need it? And we were then told by PennDOT that apparently we can't get that data in detail. And it's apparently it's by statute that they follow, that they can't give us that data. And it was.
They have a website. Well, there must be. There's certain, I mean, you can't get all the information about them, but there is.
Well, there's the kind of data that I think some people were looking for was that, let's say you had an area that was listed as a high accident area or a high consequence area, but it's because of, say, one crash of a large vehicle, for example, or a multi-vehicle crash one time, whereas if you had 10 or 15 smaller incidents, they might not show up as a different thing if you didn't have the right data. Having not studied it myself, I'm not really sure which data was unavailable, but it seemed to come as a surprise to the people on the committee that the data was not available.
We can touch base with Tom Zilla and get more detail on it.
Seems like Patton Township has some data. Get from the police department. Yeah.
We'll ask.
Okay. So we're on to public safety.
Public safety met yesterday. Besides routine reappointments, the code agency is moving into the space vacated by the Parks and Rec agency when they moved out to a rental unit on Sandy Drive. They put out for bids renovations of that space, and the base bid budget that had been approved was $205,000. They had 4 bidders, and they all came in just slightly below that on the base bid. But code also asked for bids on 5 additions, proposed additions. One was replacing carpet with new carpet. Second was safety, because of all the active shooter training that the whole COG staff had received. They felt that this is a good time, if you're going to do something to enhance the safety of the offices in COG building, this would be an appropriate time. So automatic door locks, that each agency office would have a hot button switch that somebody could press if there was a active shooter that enters the building to lock each of the agency office doors. Also, a third safety item was to use security film on all the outside, first floor outside windows and doors to reduce the possibility of an intruder breaking the window with just a manual object. It wouldn't be bulletproof or anything like that, but just a security film. Fourth option was to replace all 3 HVAC units, you know, what are they called? The heat pumps. Heat pump, thank you. There was 1 replacement in the base bid, but there were 2 more in the office. They're at the upper end of their useful life. They're working fine, but they thought if you're going to replace 1, why not replace all 3 during the renovation? Instead of waiting until the other 2 fail, and they would have to close the office for a couple of days while they do the replacements. And then the last thing, what was the last thing?
IT, power and data.
Oh, yeah, IT renovations that are required, running cables down to Suite 1. We discussed it for an hour and a half in that meeting, each individual item. But in the end, the committee was basically forwarding this information to finance, which we'll talk about tomorrow in Finance Committee.
For another hour and a half. For another hour and a half.
Well, hopefully not. None of the proposed alternatives were removed by the committee. One was neutral, I think.
Yeah.
And the rest were, yes, fine, probably fine. I did, Walt Snyder, the director of code agency, did assure the committee that they can fund they can fund everything out of their own surplus budget.
Yeah.
Which is
Fund balance.
the fund balance, which is, what, $2 million or something?
And their fund balance is over 3.
Over $2 million, so. In other words, none of the costs for any of the renovations are going to require any taxpayer money. It's all out of the fees that they charge. And what was the last thing? Well, the Regional Fire Protection Study update, just that the consulting group has been hired and they're collecting data right now. And they're planning a site visit, March, I think, March 11th, March 12th. That's
And I
right.
was in public safety, so
That's all my report.
Okay.
And on the security film, the way I understand it, that doesn't prevent somebody who's trying to shoot at the building, but that if somebody's trying to damage it in some other way,
correct,
that this prevents that.
Yeah, you know,
it's bonded to the frame of the window. Actually, it's on these windows here. It's bonded to the frame of the window, so the glass itself all stays intact. It'll probably slow down a small caliber bullet, but beyond that,
or somebody
it's
has
the best. It's the best stuff that's available.
crowbar or hammer or something like that. Again, the glass it couldn't break in with just that, unless, I guess
You have to work at it pretty hard.
Yeah, it keeps the integrity of the glass.
Yeah.
But it would take
quite a few strikes for it to break it.
There's video. Go 3M safety film if you want to see the videos.
Cool. So Larry, ad hoc.
So ad hoc, the first thing we talked about at the ad hoc was the Millbrook Marsh boardwalk.
Yeah.
At this point in time, they are looking for companies to repair the boardwalk to get part of it that's closed. Not all of it's closed, that's closed back open, but parts of the boardwalk they closed back open. So they're doing that, and they're setting up a steering committee to review what needs to be done on doing some sort of study on the future of the boardwalk and what's best. So there was a lot of discussion of that. We did have a short discussion on the code renovation.
No, actually, it was just the reverse. I think it was at the ad hoc committee that had the hour-and-a-half discussion.
It was at the ad hoc committee that had the
public
hour-and-a-half.
safety was
Because I had mentioned that we had already had a lengthy discussion on code at the budget meeting, and now we're talking about, these changes that Dan had mentioned would have to be a budget amendment, so you'll be hearing about it because they'll be asking for a budget amendment, I'm sure, after the finance department, the finance committee talks about it tomorrow. Then they talked about doing an RFP for the parking lot at the COG building. They have sealed the parking lot, but now they're going to do an RFP to have somebody come in to discuss, to assess the parking lot and decide what we need to do to bring it ADA compliant and to improve it. Apparently, a lot of the cracks are from the refuge truck that runs in there to empty the garbage is too heavy for the asphalt that they have for the parking lot.
It's actually 3 trucks. Garbage,
Cardboard,
and
cardboard
recycling.
and recycling, that's correct.
No,
So the estimate for the assessment, they said, is $1,200. They discussed having Mr. Don Frank, who is the intern that we have, he assessed the COG building. Last year, he's looking to assess another COG property, and I think they've narrowed it down to either the Patton Township Fire Station or the Park Forest Pole, but I wasn't quite sure what they decided they were going to do. And then they're looking to get a revised quote on the windows in the COG building, which are drafted. And then that was the end.
Hour-and-a-half meeting, okay.
Oh, no, the meeting was over 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Okay. So we've got 2 upcoming meetings. So it looks like Human Resources was canceled.
Yes, but the recruitment and screening committee was not, and it's not on here.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So we interviewed 6 people on Monday, a long day, and we are sending 3 on to exec.
Okay.
That will be next Thursday. Perhaps you've gotten the schedule email?
And that's
There's gonna be a-
to the executive
I'll tell you
committee,
that.
right?
And I'll be at that.
So there's just 6 candidates now?
3.
But now there's 3 candidates, okay.
There'll be an executive session after the exec meeting to discuss that personnel.
Presumably, yeah. Charlene should be sending an email. So I have met whoever the future executive
Yeah,
director.
okay. Oh, great, and, oh gosh, solar, oh, these are upcoming. No, it's a pass-through.
I think we talked about that. Did we talk about the solar?
Yeah, I think we did, yeah.
Last time?
Yeah.
Right.
Is the new agreement available yet, or is it
The
still?
new agreement I have not seen yet.
No, I don't think so.
So the new agreement hasn't come out yet, so we still don't know if there will be a cap on that or not.
Okay, all right, we'll be patient.
They're supposed to have that new agreement on before the next meeting, which is next Wednesday.
Gotcha.
There was also reports from the Center College Borough Water Authority liaison, and from our representative to the Center County Airport Authority.
Okay. And then, Dan, you want to talk about the cable consortium as needed?
We had a meeting in January just to elect a chair and vice chair, but there's no business to discuss because the cable agreement has already been
Right.
approved last year, and as Comcast has signed it.
Yeah, we just got signed copies
So
back
now
a
it's
couple weeks
official,
ago.
and really, we're not going to meet unless
Yeah.
there's a need.
Okay. And then, Hurley's not, Mr. Hurley's not here for the watershed. We have the
He
report.
gave us a report saying that the Spring Creek Watershed Commission decided to meet quarterly,
Okay,
so there's no meeting in February.
okay. Forgot that. Ellie, do you have anything, CCMP coming up?
No, that wasn't included in the transportation, but I do have another item.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do this, but I wanted to have a brief executive meeting after this to discuss a COG personnel situation for guidance on how to vote on it.
Okay. So it's, so we just wait, everybody leaves, and we stay here for that? Is that, okay.
Yeah, I promise it's brief.
Mm-hmm. And then other, I guess we're on to other business. Did I miss one there in
No.
the airport authority? Okay. The Circleville, I do have a question about other business. The Circleville Road traffic mitigation study that was mentioned in the previous meeting.
We're
Some citizen-
collecting data out there.
Okay, so I didn't see it anywhere on that, so we're just waiting. Okay, great. A lot of information for our, items for our information, but I guess we can ask for an adjournment. A motion, or unless
So moved.
and second? Those in favor?
Aye.
I'll get this thing. Oh.